Good morning, guys. My name's Chad Carlson. I'm here representing Platform.sh from our developer relations team. We're a platform as service provider that provides cloud hosting and continuous deployment for Drupal, PHP, and really any runtime that you want to configure on platform. We support over 8 runtimes and 14 managed services. Pretty simple configuration, and you can set up your integrations with your existing repository to have a deployed website with a full byte-for-byte copy of your production data and your code with every pull request. And that's my quick pitch on what it is I do for Platform and sort of what our product is. We have a table out inside the hallway. We'll be there all day if you have any questions about sort of how Drupal runs on Platform or some of the stuff that we're doing there now, some of the new developments there. But for this talk, I wanted to do something maybe a little more personal. That's why I said it as a beginner talk in the Being Human track. And hopefully it'll be helpful sort of for either those who are hiring new people and trying to get them comfortably onboarded to new projects, or you are getting started yourself on some new project or looking for a job. How's it going? So my talk today is called From Dropout to Advocate, Challenges and Lessons from a Web Dev, PHP and Drupal Noob. Start off with a little about me. Again, my name is Chad Carlson. I work for Platform.sh. We're a PaaS provider, works great with Drupal. We usually recommend composer install method for working on our application containers. And I do DevRel. Is anybody here not really familiar with what DevRel is? So it's the developer relations team. So most of our responsibilities have to do with maintaining our public documentation, which can be a difficult task. We support a number of runtimes, and we are this go-between resource, which is a cool responsibility of half the time representing engineers and product to our users, letting them know of exactly how to use new features and translating what we might consider recommended usage of a PHP container or a Go container to them. But the other half of the time we're representing the users to our engineers and product team. We're effectively the last line of QA before stuff gets publicly released to our customers. If, let's say, 9 months ago we released a Chrome headless service container, and it became my job to test that out for about a month just to figure out what was the recommended way to do it, where were the existing bugs that weren't ready for public consumption, and what does documentation look like so that somebody could actually get up and running. And this is my second Drupalcamp. A few months ago I was at Drupalcamp Atlanta, and I had a really good time. It's been nice to see some familiar faces here. And I'm happy to be here. I really am. There's part of me that is nervous and trying to convince myself a little bit of that too. Nothing against you guys. I'm just kind of an anxious person. And I'll be honest that I don't know how to do this. I don't quite know how to give a talk. This is my first talk that I've ever given. I feel sort of that imposter syndrome, fish out of water sensation in this community, in the web development community, because it isn't necessarily my background. It's something I've been doing for about 2 years. My background is in biology and psychology, not in computer science. And even more so, this is Drupal, this is PHP. My first real programming language was Python, which is very different than what gets done in PHP. And even before that, I'll talk about C++ and MATLAB, which is, don't do those. But I submitted partly because I wanted to do something I don't know how to do, partially because that's my job in DevRel. I get assignments of stuff that very few people in the company know how to do and try to translate into clear instructions for all of our customers to be able to implement on their projects if they want to. It's a weird job, but it's something I've needed to exercise and get comfortable with. Get comfortable with overcoming that feeling of feeling like I need to be an expert in 8 languages and 14 different kinds of services or databases. And in this talk, you probably heard some of the lessons I'm going to tell you before, or that I'm going to talk about through it. You've probably heard them before. But I don't know. I can notice myself be thick-headed at times. I need to remind myself continually, and I don't think I'm that different than anybody else. So maybe this is just a reminder for all of us. So because of that, I'm offering you guys maybe a chance, the only thing I can offer, some honesty about how I got onto this stage offering a talk for you guys, representing a company like Platform.sh, and to see me try to do something I've never done before and I don't know how to do. Maybe it'll help you guys try to do the same in some other area. And again, this is my job in DevRel. And I've been doing it for a while, even through my background not being in computer science. I went to school at UC Santa Barbara, and I went through many stages of trying to be a lot of different things, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. I don't think I'm special in that at all. Filmmaking, cool. Can't make any money at that. Good at math, let's be an engineer. Good thing there because I started picking up programming. But a lot of shifts from there got me to the point where I thought I wanted to be a neuroscientist, which is an advantage. Nobody in psychology departments knows how to program. And they legitimately need experiments programmed. In this case, it was a visual neuroscience lab where you're displaying stimuli on a screen in set groups of, I don't know, maybe 25 to 30 stimuli for a group of trials, do analysis on that to see where their eyes move inside of that experiment. Make some judgment on how you think the brain works based off where they're looking on the screen. Not many people in the psych department can make that small step happen, and I could. So it was helpful for me to get into that arena. So that's the new idea. Let's go to grad school. I'm going to get a PhD, and I'm going to be a professor, because I just happen to find myself in this in-between about being interested in the brain and having some coding skills. And very quickly, I made that first decision to try something else that I had absolutely know how to do, which was really deal with a real programming language. MATLAB is this hefty, behind a paywall, zero community type of programming language. Maybe not now, but at the time when I was doing it about 7 years ago, it was very difficult to get help doing something and almost impossible to get a pre-built library that already did the thing you needed. And psych laboratories don't really share that much anyways, in terms of their code. But I reached this point in grad school, which is about a 5 to 6 year commitment, where I knew that something was pretty wrong, that something didn't feel right, and I entered into this cycle of avoiding advisors, avoiding deadlines, kind of a level of depression I hadn't encountered before. And what I thought was this gigantic thing of not accomplishing grad school being a character-defining failure for the rest of my life, really. I mean, I'm not that old, but I was convinced of this. And even once I finally made the decision to drop out, that is how I defined this period of my life. I would be known as the person who dropped out of grad school and didn't do this thing that I told people I wanted to do and didn't anymore. So that was a fun transition. So now we got the most recent transition. I worked for Platform.sh as a technical writer. I really beefed up my resume at that point to say, yeah, I actually was a part of laboratories that, cared about documentation and some foresight that psych departments don't really have any management skills for their software other than downloading something and having it. Code dies on their computers. Grad students start from scratch all the time. There's no documentation for you to pick up some paper that their previous grad student never finished, which happens all the time. So every project is from scratch. And I learned Python at that point, which is one of the supported languages at Platform. But new things I don't know how to do. 8 runtimes, 14 managed services. Am I really supposed to expect of myself to be an expert in all of these? This is absolutely another story I told myself. How can I be effective? How can I be an effective member of DevRel, maintainer of this holy resource of public documentation, without beginning to think a little bit that I should be an expert? That's sort of what I thought my job was supposed to be. Not familiar with Drupal. Sincerely, when hired, no web dev experience. Couldn't tell you what a CMS was. If you explained it to me, I would understand it, but certainly not a phrase I understood. We have 8 different projects of different versions of Drupal, 7, 8 multi-site, and different variations of it in between that require our constant maintenance, and we're adding new ones all the time. Expertise in PHP. We have a set of environment variables on every single one of our application containers that defines its port credentials for connecting to databases that people need access to, and we have these libraries that are available for all of our customers that themselves need constant maintenance, that are in each one of our languages, including PHP. I'm supposed to know that for not just how to write in PHP, but specifically how to interact with each one of these services. And what is this? I remember when I first saw this ternary operator deeply embedded, used multiple times within that config reader library. It took me a while to crack it. It makes sense now, but there's nothing, at least at the time, wasn't anything equivalent in Python for me to translate that to. So I entered in the same kind of avoidance and, most importantly, imposter syndrome, overworking, and this just constant stress that I need to work more than 40 hours just to believe that I could be an expert and be helpful inside of this new company. I mean, that's not uncommon. Again, I'm not special. I'm sure every single person does that when they start some new task. And they think that, oh, I gotta perform even harder than they expect. I got a surprise. I'm way behind already. And you get stuck in it. Because it's impossible for you to be an expert in all of these things. And the biggest killer, avoiding again. Focus that I can put in 60 hours of work on a problem I'm assigned and not reach out for help when I get stuck on the problem. And just know I'll figure it out. I have to be the person to figure it out because I got to prove that I am worthy of being considered an expert in this thing. So again, you've probably heard these lessons. These are the ones that I constantly remind myself every day. I'm sure you guys are using Slack, aware of Slack. I mean, that was the first piece of feedback I got from my manager. Talk on Slack. Ask some questions. Like, I feel like if I search your name on Slack, I see, yeah, I merged this thing, and that's pretty much it. Not seeing any questions, and there aren't any stupid questions. Nobody's an expert in anything. Every single person gets frustrated and stuck and needs to leverage the fact that, I mean, in our case, we have 165 people working for our company, and it's 100% remote. I didn't meet my hiring manager until 10 months working for the company, and I'd only met one other member of my team after 7. It's a weird situation. It's very easy to get echo chambered into this you're by yourself sort of mentality if you don't make the effort to reach out when you're stuck. And they need to know it. Your managers need to know when they're frustrated because, especially if you're new, you don't know who to ask for help. So you feel like you do have to figure it out yourself. And I recognized pretty quickly once I started making connections with my company that literally every single person had this imposter syndrome feeling. At one point or another, whether it was specific to some new feature or service that got added to the company's roster as being available, or just in their tenure generally. Like, everybody feels like an imposter and gets overwhelmed and gets frozen and starts this echo chamber type behavior. And they continue to do so throughout their career, too. The thing that, when I registered this talk, when I submitted it, I put it as a beginner track. Because I think maybe I was hoping that I might talk to people who are in a beginning stage as well, and that might be my primary audience. And I realized as I was making the slides that one of the other audience members might be like managers and people organizing teams and finding that struggle of having somebody who, like me, is quiet and not communicative, that they're getting frustrated and stuck on something. And what I've noticed is it could be helpful to have some mechanisms in place to set up a support network for people. Some of my connections were developed organically, like Larry Garfield works in our same department. He is an expert at Drupal and PHP. He's my go-to for that. He's one of many experts that I can reach out for when I have a question. He enjoys being a teacher. That wasn't something that was mandated to me by my manager, but a few of them were. We have a system in place in our company that I seriously think was one of the most helpful things that happened since I joined, which was new hires get a buddy who's been with the company for more than 6 years that you speak with once a week for 6 months, just for an hour. And literally questions like, how do I get started? What is that? Where should I go to look for this? Oh, you felt this way too. Like super simple sort of emotional responses to things that even now today, I've been working there for almost 2 years and I can reach out to him and have those same type of questions. But maybe even more important than that is the company mentor. This is a guy who's been with the company for 12 years. So if I need this, who do I talk to? You know, why does this thing in the company work this way? What's the history of this repo being over here doing this instead of doing something else? And where are the experts? Who should I ask for something? And maybe even more important than that, this is how we do it now. Where are we going? For the company as a whole, for the way that our accounts work, for the way that engineering works, like what are we doing? And last of all, this is another organic connection I made was, you know, I grew up in a household where mental health was something that just wasn't considered as an important thing. I'm not special. I know that's not an uncommon thing to grow up around. So for me, I definitely grew up when I was going through my stuff, not thinking I could or should talk to anybody about it. Just the way it is. But because of that, I don't have a tendency to bring that into my workplace or bring that into anything else. But I did find this one guy here. This is Aaron. He's our VP of Agency Partners. I can tell him about anything I'm feeling, and we just meet for coffee a couple times a week, literally just online, joke around, talk about our hobbies. In my case, my hobbies are writing, so we talk about that. This is the hardest one for me. This is the one I need to remind myself, so that's why it's in here. My girlfriend will always tell me that I work too much, even though I just said previously not to work over 40 hours a week. I will continuously do this and work till 5:30 and try to make it up on a different day and start later. But I really try to stick to this 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, except for today type of schedule. Because otherwise you just go insane and you start getting back into that echo chamber cycle of thinking that you need to be an expert and thinking that you're somehow behind when things are fine. And the last thing that I found is we have a complicated product. Besides all the different things that we support, all of the languages, all the services, it's a lot to try and figure out. And maintaining documentation has so many parts to it. So I haven't found a better way to get close to expertise other than coming up with some sort of fun project that exactly works with our thing. I mean, you know that feeling of like, you're working, you have a deadline, you are given an assignment. It's easy to get stuck and frustrated. But if it's doing something for fun, you can kind of find those edge cases pretty easily trying to answer your own questions of getting some site off the ground that's entirely for you. For me personally, I've been working a lot with Hugo, trying to migrate our documentation from JavaScript to Hugo. And so I've been doing a lot of projects around there and finding all kinds of weird things that I didn't know existed on our system. And that's really what I have prepared for today. I guess that general message is, I hope that this was helpful, that this is not something I know how to do, and I hope the content of this was something for you to at least remind yourself of, and that it's okay to not know how to do something. It's okay not to know how to reach out for help, and you're not alone there. So thank you very much. I don't know. I think we have time for questions. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but hey.
So it sounds like your current work environment, everybody's remote. Did you say that?
Yeah, there's one French office where 60% of the time 5 people work there. But other than that, everybody's remote.
So I guess it kind of goes without saying, because you were, isolated per se, maybe it took you a little bit longer to make those connections versus if you were in an office where, the 160 people went in every day.
Yeah, I think about that a lot, about what that transition would have been like, because this transition was more like, oh, I'm kind of in my comfort zone, to then I've reinforced it, to then get back up and get into it. Whereas working in an office might have been initially pretty abrasive, but forced to, integrate.
Right, yeah. Interesting.
Anybody else?
Missed a little bit of the beginning. Could, if you don't mind, could you kind of bring us up to speed on like how long you've been using Drupal? Kind of got you into it. I see your platform.
Yeah.
Kind of give us just kind of, if you don't mind.
No. What I tried to do with this talk was talk more about my personal experience being kind of an outsider, feeling imposter syndrome, not just within the Drupal community, but web development and PHP, because I work for a company that doesn't just support PHP. We have about 8 runtimes for our application containers and this large array of services that we provide. And my position in my company is maintaining public documentation, among many other things like Drupal templates and additional libraries for interacting with our containers in something like Drupal. And what that's been like for me to go from not a computer science background to 5-6 years of Python background to getting the crash course I've had in the last year and a half, 2 years with Platform, working with PHP and Drupal. Personally, the way I interact with it is we have 8 template projects that are pretty easy when you go to our GitHub organization. You can spin them up into a deploy project on our platform pretty easily, but that's our day-to-day interacting with Drupal, is supporting those, providing updates to those when they're available. And other than that, the other cool part of our job is generally playing. So we find some other strange distribution specific for higher ed, or we have another one for the GovCMS that we have as a template. So we spend a lot of time taking a little diversion and trying to support templates like that and get them deployed.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How did you get started in Python? Like, how did that even come about to be? I saw you had on the slideshow, the little thing wired up. Was that part of your experience? Like, did you make a device that was relevant to your field at the time or something?
So that picture was from another grad student of mine was doing an experiment with EEG where she was trying to figure out sort of synchronization. Like if you had a virtual partner that was kind of wagging their finger, like what were the stimuli that would cause you to synchronize with them and desynchronize with them, and how did that relate to the temporal signals in your brain detected by the EEG machine? I think she at that time was using probably MATLAB too. For whatever reason, psychology field is just in love with MATLAB, because very early they made this thing called Site Toolbox that just became the only thing, and then hugely popular because it was the only thing. But about 2 years before I started grad school, this other group of people made an equivalent in Python. And so I think I reached a point where MATLAB is so heavy and it became so difficult to share code that when I found this alternative, I just started, okay, first place I'm going to approach is learning how to do the same experiments I was doing, displaying images on screen in Python now. And then, of course, that translated into doing things like neural networks and machine learning type of stuff.
It's a big transition.
Yeah, it was. But it was a pretty interdisciplinary lab. And Python was clearly a much better option than this heavy thing like MATLAB.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions or anything?
I'd have to say I appreciate you explaining like towards the end about like staying after work, because I'm a year and a few months into my position as a web specialist, so there's things that I want to learn so much about, but just reaching out to people and not overworking yourself, just setting boundaries. I appreciate hearing that.
I'm glad. Yeah, I know for me it's like the reaching out was difficult. Staying after, I mean, it's so easy to do. It's so easy to just like get obsessed with the idea of how far behind you are. And that's fine. Nothing's going to explode. I'm not even on engineering. I do documentation. It's better if it's right than rushed and stressed over.
Because then you don't have to do it twice.
Yeah. I don't want to do that. All right. Thank you guys for coming out and listening.
Thank you for sharing
Thanks,
your
Chad.
struggle.
Nice job.
Thank you.